All right, let's jump right in. We've all been taught that life back in the 19th century was, well, rough, right? A constant struggle. But what if that's not the full picture? What if there are personal journals from that exact time telling a completely different story? A story of a daily life so easy, so comfortable, it sounds like something from the future. Today, we're diving into a piece of history that might have been deliberately erased, one journal entry at a time.
So on one side, you've got the story we all know. Waking up in a freezing room, having to light a fire just to not see your breath, boiling water for everything and hoping the ice delivery shows up so your food doesn't go bad. A life of non-stop chores. But then, there's this other version. We're talking about over 127 personal documents, diaries, letters from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And they paint a picture of automatic heat, instant hot water straight from the tap, and these incredible cooling chambers built right into the walls that kept food fresh for days. No ice needed.
Okay, so right away, the big question just hangs in the air, doesn't it? How on earth is that possible? Were these people just writing fiction, or were they living in a reality we've completely forgotten about? Well, to figure this out, let's zoom in on one very specific, very real place.
Our whole investigation kicks off in Kansas City with the municipal building. It was built back in 1884. And this isn't some mythical place. It's a real, 5-story, red brick building that you can go see today. But according to the journals of the folks who worked there, it wasn't just a building. It was, for lack of a better word, alive.
So let me introduce you to Margaret Morrison. She was a records clerk working inside this building. Now listen to this entry from her journal in November of 1893. She says she woke up at 6 a.m. and her room was already warm and comfortable. Outside, the thermometer read a freezing 18 degrees Fahrenheit. But inside, she said it felt like a spring morning. And she was just using a single light blanket. How?
And here's the kicker, the part that just doesn't make any sense. There were no stoves lit, no fires to tend to. The journals don't give us any blueprints or engineering notes. The warmth was just there. The building itself was providing it. All this comfort just coming from taps in the wall.
Margaret goes on to write about the water. She says it was hot the second she turned the tap. Not warm, not getting warm, instantly hot enough to make steam rise from the basin. So naturally, she asks her manager, Mr. Wilson, about it. And his reaction is just odd. He just smiles and says, "You'll get used to it." Like this incredible piece of technology was just the most normal thing in the world.
So just stop and think about what this one building was supposedly doing for its occupants. Back in the 1890s, we're talking automatic building-wide heating that needed no tending, instant, endless hot water, these cooling chambers in the walls keeping food fresh for days without a single block of ice. And get this, some tops even dispensed hot coffee and tea. This wasn't just a place to work, it was a complete life support system.
Now look, if this was just one person's diary, you could maybe write it off as an exaggeration, right? A fantasy. But it wasn't just Margaret. There are dozens of other letters and journals from people in that exact same building, all describing the very same unbelievable daily life.
Take Robert Chen, for instance. He worked there a few years after Margaret. In a letter to his brother, he says something really profound. He doesn't talk about fighting the cold or the heat. He describes it as a partnership with architecture. He literally says the building handles all the basic needs so that he can just live. That phrase, partnership with architecture, is absolutely key here. Remember it.
And then you have Sarah Peterson. In 1903, she's writing to her mother who clearly doesn't believe a word of what she's saying. So Sarah actually timed it. She says, from turning the tap to hot water flowing, 3 seconds. That's all, every single day. You can feel her frustration trying to convince her own mother that this impossible reality was her everyday normal.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really wild. Because it isn't just about dusty old journals from a century ago. The Kansas City Municipal Building is still standing. It's been renovated into apartments. And the people living there today, well, they're experiencing something eerily familiar. So, let's meet a modern-day Sarah. She's a current resident, been living in the building since 2020, and by some crazy coincidence, her apartment is on the exact same floor where Margaret Morrison worked and wrote those journal entries over 130 years ago. And her daily routine? It's almost a carbon copy.
This table really spells it out. Look at the difference. We compare Sarah's morning routine to her friend Katie's, who lives in a brand new, modern building. Sarah wakes up at 7, already warm. She has an instant hot shower and is out the door by 7:15. 15 minutes, boom, done.
Katie, though, she wakes up at 6:30 to a cold apartment, has to crank the heat, wait for the water to get hot, and she doesn't get out the door until 7:45. That means Sarah gains 45 minutes every single day, not because of some smart home gadget, but because she lives in a 140-year-old building. So when we ask Sarah to describe what it's like living there, listen to what she says. She says, "Most people fight their buildings every single day. I don't. The building and I are partners." And remember, no one prompted her with this idea. She came up with that word, partners, all by herself.
And this right here, this is the whole story in a nutshell. It's incredible. On the left, you have Margaret Morrison's journal from 1894, "The building is our partner." On the right, you have Sarah, a resident in 2026, "The building and I are partners." 132 years apart, same building, same floor, and they use the exact same language to describe the relationship with the space. It's an unbroken chain of experience.
Now, this story from one building is mind-blowing enough, right? But what if it wasn't just a one-off? The sources we're looking at suggest that this wasn't an anomaly at all. It hints that this building might just be one piece of a much larger, forgotten global network.
Remember, this whole thing kicked off with 127 different documents, journals, letters, diaries, all from different people in different places, but all talking about the same, almost magical level of daily comfort between the 1870s and the 1920s.
But it didn't stop there. From those first documents, the search has expanded, and now researchers believe they've identified over 800 buildings, 800, across the globe that have similar architectural quirks and, more importantly, are linked to personal stories describing this same effortless way of life.
And we're not just talking about America either. Of course, you see accounts from places like Chicago, Boston, Philly, and San Francisco. But you also find them in St. Petersburg, Russia, in Melbourne, Australia, in Montreal, Canada. This wasn't some local invention. It seems to have been a widespread international style of architecture.
Okay, so this begs the biggest question of all. If this way of life was so advanced, so comfortable, and so widespread, where did it go? Why do our history books tell us a story of hardship and struggle? This brings us to the final and frankly the most disturbing claim in these sources, that this knowledge wasn't just lost to time, it was actively erased.
Just look at the history of the Kansas City building itself. It opens in 1884, works perfectly. Then in 1924, they try to modernize it with a newfangled gas heating system, and it fails repeatedly. By 1930, the city's own engineer basically throws his hands up and says the new systems are unnecessary and incompatible. It's like the building itself was rejecting these modern inferior systems, and to this day, its original systems are still the ones providing heat, hot water, and cooling.
And this might be the smoking gun. It's an unsigned letter, found hidden away with a bunch of photos documenting the building's life. It's dated just one day before that failed modernization began. It says, and I quote, "They'll make us say it was always hard, that comfort used to be purchased, but that's not true. We're being made to forget, but someone should remember." That's not someone talking about progress. That sounds like someone witnessing the deliberate rewriting of history.
So when you boil it all down, what was really lost here wasn't just a clever heating system. It was an entire philosophy, a daily life partnership, a world where architecture wasn't just a passive shelter, but an active partner designed to automatically take care of human comfort, freeing people from that constant daily struggle just to meet their basic needs. So this story, this account of a forgotten past backed up by personal journals and living on in buildings that are still working today, it leaves us with one huge, unsettling question. If a way of life that was so much more comfortable, so much more efficient, could be so completely wiped from our collective memory, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other parts of our history have we been made to forget?